Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the Monday, December 18th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Ms. G, will you please take the roll?
Ms. Hockenberry?
Here.
Mr. Krasner? Here. Mr. Rankin?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodiska?
Here. All right, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
Second,
Go for it.
Mr. Stevens, you need to be ready for this. Mr. Krasner beat him to it. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Do we have any petitions for the items not on tonight's agenda, Ms. G?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. All right. Item 6, appropriately named old business. We will be dealing with the 116 Great Falls Street subdivision application. Do we have a staff report on this? No? Yes?
Maybe so.
I apologize. So before you is an action for a subdivision on 116 Great Falls. There is a staff report in your packets. And what I'd like to do is briefly walk through that staff report and react to any questions. The applicants are here tonight. They don't plan to make a presentation, but they are available to answer questions if they come up.
I have a question. Why are we hearing this for the 8th time?
Well, this is, we certainly don't have to
And are there
listen
any
to the presentation,
changes?
but this is, there are no changes since it was presented to the Planning Commission as a work session item in, let me reference that, it's in the timing section in October. There are some recommendations that staff has for attaching as conditions to the approval of the subdivision. Those conditions begin on line 180.
Yeah, for the sake of the public and the procedure, we should go through it. I was sort of joking, but.
Sure, thank you. So before you tonight is an action on a preliminary and final plat for a subdivision. This is within the, predominantly the 300 block of North Maple Avenue, although it touches on other streets within the area as well. As you may know, subdivisions are guided by Chapter 38 of the City Code, and it requires several technical items to be considered as part of the approval process. The application, jumping to line 17 of the staff report here, this is a joint application from the Snyder family and the Columbia Baptist Church. The lines there in the staff report describe the property that's owned and involved, and those properties are also included on the table there beginning at line 81. The subdivision will have a number of effects, that it'll do a couple lot line adjustments to increase the size of some of the smaller lots. That'll make it possible to do a subdivision and create lots of the minimum size. It'll also bring one of the lots up to standard with the Historic, Cultural, and Conservation Overlay District to make one of the existing lots larger up to that 11,250 square foot expectation. And then also there will be some granting of easements on the North Washington Street side of the property. So as I said, the properties touch most of the block, and this is an opportunity to clean up easements along all frontages. The existing properties and the tax map numbers are there, included on lines 41 through 45. Line 47 of the staff reports begins the background information on subdivision procedure, and it talks generally about what subdivisions are. It's a legal process for combining or separating lots, doing lot line adjustments. All of those things are included in this application. Beginning on line 56, this is the last time that these two property owners will come in for a joint application. Previously, they had come in with a joint request for a conditional rezoning. That resulted in the acceptance of a number of proffered conditions. This subdivision, the applicants are again coming forward as a joint applicant. Following the subdivision, the two applicants can then part and go separate ways. So the Snyder family can come in with a grading plan to construct the new single-family house on the new lot, and the church can come in with either a site plan or a site plan amendment for their parking, landscaping, and sidewalk. The reason that that's pertinent to the action tonight is that this is the opportunity to make sure that either performance bonds are posted or things are recorded appropriately on the plats to make sure that any conditions that were part of the joint application carry through to those individual actions by both parties. Line 70 begins the discussion of the background process about the existing land uses, zoning, future land use map. The table summarizes the current uses, zoning, and the designations on the future land use map. The zoning and the future land use map, for reference, were both updated on the Planning Commission's recommendation and council final action. The proposed subdivision is consistent with those future land use map and zoning designations, including uses and lot areas. Line 103 is where staff comments are provided, and staff comments were, as always, requested from a number of specialties on city staff. There were a number of limited comments provided, no comments from zoning, public works. Urban forestry had several comments, a handful of comments. Fairfax Water was satisfied, and then several technical comments from the planning staff. The planning staff comments really boil down to the conditions that are included beginning on line 180. And I'll step through those recommended conditions. Several of them are technical in nature. Number one, properly reporting property owner names on the final plat for the property owners and adjacent properties. Proffer statements, recording on the final plat the proffered statements themselves. This is a mechanism for making sure that those proffered conditions continue to show up on future documents. Noting that these properties are governed by the Historic, Cultural, and Conservation Overlay, the HCC. Properly getting a recommendation for the subdivision name from the Historical Commission. Passing authority for the arborist and urban forestry to review tree preservation requirements at a later time. Typically, by the code, that would be handled at time of subdivision. However, more technical information is available at a later time in the process, so that authority would pass to that later time. Public improvements, also similar to tree preservation, this would cover needs for things like water service or sewer service. Right away on Great Falls Street, this was a relatively recent pickup in the staff review of the materials. The issue here is that in the subdivision ordinance, there is discussion about both sidewalk requirements and street right-of-way requirements. The right-of-way on Great Falls there is approximately 40 feet, and there is a sidewalk further down on the block on that side of Great Falls. Given the existing context, though, there's a historic structure there on 116 Great Falls that occupies the corner lot, and their setback currently is 24 feet from the right-of-way. R1A requirements for a setback are 30 feet, so requiring another 5 feet of right-of-way into the property would diminish that front setback even further, down to 20 feet, which I don't think is the public intent of the HCC. So instead, what's offered here is an option that instead of getting that 5 feet of either easement or dedication further into the front yard setback, instead on the plan sheet show how a sidewalk can be constructed beyond the existing line of the curb. I think this would meet the expectation for having sidewalk constructed as part of land development. It also would have extremely limited impact on street parking because the bulk of that property is already signed for no parking up to the corner. So this is taking advantage of pavement that's currently underutilized by leaving the option to build a sidewalk there in the future. The importance of writing it on the document now is so that either the current or the future owners can buy with the expectation that there is going to be a sidewalk. So hopefully that would limit any sort of contentious conversation that has to happen in the future about whether or not to build a sidewalk. Right away on North Washington Street, this is just cleaning up. There was an easement adjustment that was to be made on that street, and this would just clarify the width of that easement. And then number 9 is performance bond, and this would be to require a posting of a bond against the construction of the sidewalk and the landscaping buffer that was included in the approved conceptual development plan. With that, we are at the end of the staff report, and I'm happy to take questions.
I have no questions, but clearly other people do. Mr. Stevens, you first.
At what point does the sidewalk have to be completed?
I believe under the proffered conditions it was within 3 years? 2 years, sorry.
Within 2 years of?
The zoning approval, I believe.
2 years of zoning approval, okay, thanks.
My question has to do with preservation of the 3 historic homes, and is that one, line number 192 to 195, the historical designation to protect those homes?
The HCC is one designation that will help to protect those homes. The stronger one would actually be including the proffer statements, that the
Okay.
proffer statements go beyond the HCC
Okay.
requirements.
I just want to make sure that's in there, because that's one of my main concerns and has been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Krasner?
I think I asked this at the work session, I'll ask it again. The more times this comes, the more times I'll come up with new questions, but I think I asked about the fence, the existing fence there that's non-conforming, that's going to be brought into conformance,
The existing fence will be eliminated.
totally eliminated, along Maple I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, it's eliminated per the conceptual development plan.
okay, good. That's it for me.
So if the sidewalk isn't built within 2 years, what occurs?
So the performance bond would cover the cost of construction and engineering. And so at the end of 2 years, if the sidewalk were not constructed, then the city could cash the performance bond and build the sidewalk.
What would trigger that?
I think it would be the city electing to move forward with the project.
And just so we're clear, this is just sidewalk on Maple, right? You were just talking about the potential for sidewalk on Great Falls, but that's some sort of theoretical future possibility, right?
Correct. The performance bond would be specifically for the sidewalk that was shown in the CDP, and that was the North Maple sidewalk. The Great Falls sidewalk, and one of the reasons staff did not pursue this as aggressively as North Maple is because even that segment on Great Falls would still leave a gap at the existing Foxcraft property and a small piece on the adjoining property.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, but you were saying by designating this, it just points out that down the road, should a sidewalk go in, it would be permitted to go into the current road right
Yes.
away.
Yeah, this is an opportunity to have an advanced dialogue about what the best location is for a sidewalk, especially now when we're having that conversation about preserving historic structures, that we want to take full advantage of any existing land, like underutilized pavement.
Okay, and then I think I read somewhere, but so the sidewalk has 2 years. What about all the trees and landscaping? What is the time frame on when that has to be done?
The landscaping, I think where staff I think what staff is suggesting with the performance bond is that the landscaping for the visual buffer be included in that performance bond.
But they still have the same 2 years to do it,
Correct.
and then we could get the money and do it ourselves.
Correct.
Go for it.
Again, the more time I get. And I think there's a note on the cover sheet talking about nutrient credits for the house. Is that there? I mean, I assume nothing's been designed as far as any BMPs. You're trying to cover your bases. Hopefully, the use of nutrient credits will be to a minimum.
Yes, Karen White at Walter Phillips. We haven't gone into the design details yet, but we'll, look at what we can put on site and then what we'd have to purchase as well,
Okay,
if we can't meet it on site.
okay. All right.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, let me just say, I'm glad we're getting to a vote on this, sort of finally. We have discussed this at great length. My position previously and still is that, this is not a perfect solution to this issue. There are some drawbacks as it relates to these historical homes and the splitting up of these zoning areas. But that said, I think with this, the group and the team before us have worked really hard to come up with a manageable solution that meets the objectives of both the city and the residents as best as possible. And I appreciate everybody's sort of hard work to try to get to the best solution possible, though not perfect. This is an example, in my view, of not letting the perfect get in the way of the good here. So I'm happy to bring this to a vote here finally, let these residents get on with the building of this property, and say thank you to everybody who's worked really hard on this. So does anyone else have any other comments before we take a vote?
Well, we don't have a motion before us. But I have a comment.
Yeah, I mean,
can make a
before we
comment.
make the motion, I
Yeah.
was inartfully
I will
said.
make a comment after the motion.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final approval of subdivision munis number 2015-1347 for 116 Great Falls Street and Columbia Baptist Church subdivisions as shown on the final plat and contingent upon administrative staff review and approval of pending ministerial items, notes, easement, and so forth, listed in the staff report.
I'll second it.
All right. Discussion on the motion?
I just wanted to say, I cannot vote for this subdivision. I don't think you're surprised, as I do not think that our zoning code allows for R1B lots to be placed inside an R1A zone, nor does our code recognize block zoning. And further, the oddly laid out lot lines support that this is spot zoning. I don't think this is proper zoning under our current code. And if we wanted to have block zoning, I think we needed to change our code.
Okay, any other comments?
I'll make a brief comment. I mean, I share some of the concerns of my colleague, but it's better than when we first saw the proposal. It's a difficult proposal. I know there are a lot of opinions about the merits of it. I think overall, at this point, the rezoning has been approved. I was pleased to see that the comprehensive plan changes were part of that, concurrent with the rezoning. And based on that, I feel that it's an improved application, and I feel at least at this point, the subdivision is, we're kind of at a perfunctory stage at this point. So I mean, at this point, I'll support the subdivision based on the improvements overall along the way here.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
No.
Mr. Wodisco?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. We're going to be discussing the comprehensive plan and future land use map amendments for the 2013 boundary agreement areas. This is George Mason School Campus and other area undesignated parcels. We have seen this before in work session, correct? I mean, I was very familiar with this document.
I gotta say, I have no idea what this thing is saying. Fairfax County
It's
is like bizarre coding of stuff.
Fairfax County. Excluded if you're colorblind.
They are a little mustardy, aren't they? Like that at all. I didn't think of it when I first looked.
Before we begin this, some internal sort of housekeeping. There was a little bit of confusion about whether these documents were provided. Does everybody have what is about to go on the screen? I do. Mr. Stevens sent some of it out, but does everybody have it? Mr. Krasner, did you ever get the
I mean, I saw things online. I never got, I know there were logistical snafus. I did not get, I shouldn't say that. Mr. Stevens did forward me, I think, the attachment. I did eventually see it. So, I mean, we'll talk about that maybe at the end of the meeting about going forward, things for next year about packages and ways we distribute information. But ultimately, I mean, I did see it, so we can proceed.
Yeah, no, I think my timing was the same as yours, so.
Yeah.
That being said, Mrs. Aubrey, please give us a little more detail about these documents,
The
because
map is not pulling up, so you can refer to your hard copy map.
that is consistent
I'll
with
go
the,
continue. Okay, Carly Aubrey, planning staff. The intent of the requested resolution is to provide comprehensive plan text amendments and suitable land use designations for the properties that became part of the city through the 2013 Boundary Adjustment Agreement with Fairfax County. Based on plans and studies completed for the areas and the recently approved bond referendum, the proposed designations would provide future land use designations where they are currently undesignated and also reflect the long-term future planning goals of the city. The three areas are included in three different planning opportunity areas that are called out in the comprehensive plan. The property yard is within the Gordon Road Triangle property planning opportunity area. The Falls Plaza Shopping Center is in the West End POA, and the school-related parcels are in the schools-related parcels POA. Since 2011, the city has adopted 5 small area plans for the 8 POAs. These are the 3 remaining areas that have yet to be, have a small area plan created for them. And last year, in 2016, Chapter 4 of the comp plan was amended to do 3 things. The first was to recognize the small area plans. 2 was to include revitalization areas, which encompasses the city's main commercial areas and generally align with the POAs. All 3 of these areas are within the West Broad Street revitalization area. And then the entire city was designated as an urban development area. The proposed land use designations for the city property yard and the portion of the Falls Plaza are proposed as business, and this is consistent with the adjacent parcels in those areas, and in the case of Falls Plaza, the rest of that larger parcel. In regards to the schools-related parcels, they have been identified as needing text amendments in Chapter 4 for a special revitalization district for education and economic development. And this would establish goals and strategies that are desirable for this area. These goals and strategies are listed on pages 8 to 11 of the staff report. And I'm going to go over some changes that have been made since the joint work session with City Council. The language for the first strategy on page 10 has been amended to read, standards should provide for building heights and massing compatible to the adjacent schools, while allowing for higher building heights adjacent to arterials and nearby commercial development. And then a potential range of floor area ratios and square footages for development has been provided as well. The second strategy on page 10 has been expanded to include more potential financing mechanisms that should be considered. The goal regarding environmentally responsible development has been revised to include integration for educational opportunities and a strategy added regarding green building and site design for the school buildings and facilities. And a goal has been added to encourage collaboration between commercial uses and the educational programs with the city schools, VATEC, and UVA. Additionally, since the City Council referred the resolution out, there's been some minimal additions and deletions of text made primarily for greater clarity and to reference the pending small area plan and recently completed geothermal assessment. And these are shown and underlined in strike-through text. On the future land use map, which you're not going to see apparently, the future land use map would be shown, there would be a red line around the school-related parcels to show it as a special revitalization district for education and economic development. And they would have a designation of parks and open space with 2 school symbols for approximately 24 acres, and then mixed use for the remaining 10 acres. And this would provide suitable land use designations for the new high school and expanded middle school, as well as signal the city's intention to facilitate and support significant mixed-use development on the commercial portion. The school board discussed the item at their December 12th meeting and provided a recommendation of approval, and we have received a letter from Arlington County stating that they have no objections to the proposed amendments. And the City Council hearing for adoption would be January 22nd. So at this time, do you have any questions for staff?
I know that they're not coming up, these attachments. The Fairfax County one was provided just for informational purposes. I was very confused by their map, but beyond that, I was just trying to understand. It looks like it's in agreement with what we're saying. There doesn't look like there's any issue here that I should be aware of. It's just,
It was a request from council during the work session. They wanted to see what the surrounding county land uses were for compatibility reasons. So we included that in there, and
Did you, I mean, we got the comments from Arlington, which is nice, but Arlington really isn't anywhere close to here. Did we get comments from Fairfax?
not yet, not a formal letter, but they have submitted a formal letter, and then we also emailed the planning director and somebody else, a couple other people.
Okay, so there have been meetings or conversations at least?
Yes, yeah, Jim Snyder's been having meetings with relevant parties.
Okay.
any other questions on this? Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments. You take comments now, or?
Go for it.
Okay. On page 7, where it says potential development uses, it mentions an FAR of 2.5 to 4. And I'm just wondering, did we want to put a lid on the FAR for this site?
4 is
Pretty dense.
pretty good, pretty dense.
Pretty good, but
I'm not sure.
you never know. I mean, this says to me that we wouldn't entertain anything beyond an FAR of 4. And at this point in time, we don't know what type of development proposals we may be getting.
Mr. Stevens, where are you in the document?
It's page 7, where it says potential development uses.
Yep.
Third bullet,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm with you. Okay, thank you.
And I would just contrast that with the next page, about halfway down, where we talk about density greater than 3.0 floor area ratio. So there, we don't put a lid or an upper limit?
That's, the 3.0 comes out of the revitalization area language and kind of the state statutes as to what FAR you need to have to be considered a revitalization area. So that's where the 3.0 comes from. The 2.5 to 4.0 is provided as a range. It can be discussed if we want to consider upping it.
Well, again, it strikes me as, since we don't know what kind of proposals we're going to get, that we're putting a limit on this. And if we got the right proposal and had a FAR of 4.5, let's say, this might suggest that would be a problem. So I would just throw that out for consideration. I realize, I mean, this is not the final time that issue will be addressed, but it just strikes me that,
What, greater than?
yeah, that's right. In other words, I think our concern is having an FAR that's too low rather than one that's too high at this site, quite unlike the rest of the city, where that would be a big problem.
Do we know if this FAR range is taking into account the entire site, including the high school? Because obviously then it would be hard to, because there's fields and stuff that would factor in. Or do you think that, I'm just trying to read the language, is this referring to that FAR just on the 10 acres of development? I'm not an English major is what I'm saying. But you understand the question, right? Because the FAR 4 on the full site, that would be pretty tough to do if we're going to build a school and
Yeah, my
have some
understanding is
fields on
that
the rest of
it's
it.
supposed to encompass the whole site, but we could provide.
Anyway, maybe that's worth
clarification
clarifying.
on
I'm
that.
with Mr. Stevens, though. I mean, I don't know that there's a benefit to put a cap on it, although I suppose some people would like to maybe put a cap on it, but.
I actually read this to be just the mixed-use area. It says, and approximately 10 acres for mixed-use development with a potential 2.5 to 4.0 floor area, et cetera. I mean, I agree entirely with Mr. Rankin. I think this is referring specifically to that, is how I read it.
Well, and it's also interesting because it says potential 2.5 to 4.0 floor area ratio / 1.2 million to 1.5 million square feet or higher on the schools-related parcels. So maybe schools-related parcels is defined somewhere, but also, or higher, I guess, suggests that it could be higher than a 4.0 or 1.5 million square. It's a fairly confusing sentence, I guess, is what we're determining.
I would agree.
Just for clarity, I mean, a quick math, a 4.0 FAR on the 10 acres is 1.7 million square feet of stuff. So it's still a healthy amount.
Well, so that suggests that it's indicating that 2.5 to 4 probably is referring to just the 10 acres, but
Right.
then again, that 1.2 to 1.5 math doesn't necessarily match up. And then it throws in an or higher at the end anyway, so I don't know.
And it's labeled potential, the whole section, so it's, I don't know that it binds you.
don't think we could
But
hit
it's a,
traffic complaints.
sounds
Well,
like an
the
email.
actual whereas is just say, allows for density greater than 3.0 floor area ratio in a portion thereof. So that would be a more binding piece of it. So, I don't know, I'm just saying,
I would favor.
I thought it was very
I
clear
would
there.
favor someone taking a stab at clarifying whatever the heck we mean there, since we don't really know.
And maybe as part of that, if the intention is to put a lid on it, 4.0, just to make that clear that
Yeah, that would be worth specifically debating, I guess, right?
Is that our intention?
Is that your intention, he asked?
No, actually, at this point, as I said earlier, since we don't know what type of development proposals we're going to get, I wouldn't want to limit it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if it all were cleared up and it basically said, hey, on the 10 acres, we're looking for a 2.5 to 4.0 floor area ratio or higher, that conveys to me my sentiment, which is we want something pretty dense there, 2.5 to 4, or higher could work. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be up for it, but that would, if you kept that or higher in there, that would say that you could go above 4 if you had a compelling proposal.
And that our intention at this phase is to preserve as much flexibility for potential development
Yeah.
proposals that we might get.
I mean, I agree. I think 4 is probably
Safe.
enough, but I agree. I mean, this is a unique site where we want to consider all options. If somebody came and said, hey, I've got this really awesome idea, it gets you all these things you want, turns out the FAR is 4.2.
Right.
I don't want us to be like, well,
Exactly.
gosh dang it, we said it can't be more than 4, so I guess eliminate that awesome public swimming pool that you
That's
have
just a picky.
on the 18th floor. I don't,
I agree with you.
but obviously, none of this is binding. I mean, I think this is just the comprehensive plan. I mean, like, there are ways to get around it. I just think I think the guidance we're trying to give the public and developers
Yeah, the plan should
is
be more open-ended.
We want it
rather
to be
than
pretty
less.
dense.
Unless there's a compelling reason that we're looking to put a ceiling on it, the plan should be more open-ended. Ultimately, the rezoning,
Right.
would nail down the specifics.
Yeah, and I think as long as the or higher is in there, because in some ways, if you just said with a potential of 2.5 or higher, in some ways that gives the developer or somebody that thinks, well, as long as it's over 2.5, they're going to be happy. But if you actually say 2.5 to 4 or higher, that suggests like, no, we really want it to be, we don't want it to just be 2.5. We want you to really consider it. It could be higher. I don't know. I'm not a wordsmith, but as long as we aren't conveying that we're somehow not going to consider.
I mean, the plan is a guide, although if we do put a ceiling in, then it just makes it that much more difficult if there were, I don't know how realistic the proposal above 4 would be, but if there was one and the plan, had a range and we were exceeding that range, or the project was exceeding that range, then, there's an extra step that both we as the planning commission and the council would need to do to explain why we would support something that's not in conformance with the plan, because it's exceeding the range that's called for. So if we want to be more open-ended, I suppose the comprehensive plan is the place to be more open-ended.
I like
I
the
was gonna
idea
say,
of the
though-
and higher.
maybe I'm simplifying, but for the motion we're doing tonight, what it says in the resolution is actually what's important. And the resolution just says allows for density greater than 3.0 FAR.
Yeah, I
So that
think,
leaves it pretty open-ended.
well, and I
It's
think.
not saying it should be over
Sure.
3.0, but
I
it
mean-
says it should, we allow for it.
I mean, I'm
So-
personally pretty confident I'm going to move this forward, but I also think this is our kind of last opportunity to ask council to tweak it.
Right,
So I
Yeah,
think if
but
we,
I guess what I'm just saying, like, our motion is on this resolution.
right.
Not on any of this
Yeah.
other stuff.
My
Well,
worry
it will
would be,
the stuff in the box on pages 8 to 11 is what
Yeah.
will be comprehensive plan text.
Well, that's true, okay.
So my recommendation, it seems to be general agreement on this, is whoever's making the motion, I don't know who that is at this moment, please make a note to adjust the language on page 7, bullet point 3, to have some open-endedness. There seems to be
Well,
just,
that's a good
there's no
Isn't it-
reason to.
does it?
Isn't there language on page 10 and in the box that we want to change?
Yeah, that's
That's
where-
what you want to
So,
change.
Yeah,
'cause
we
that's
want
the
to say
comp-
appropriate
Exactly.
statement include floor area ratios of 2.5 to 4.0. That's what you guys are talking about changing.
Right, Page 7 is just the staff report explaining.
Summary, yeah.
Explaining the specific text on page 10.
All right, so
do we
the
want-
point is the same.
Yep.
Mr. Stevens, you have other questions?
Yeah, I
I
just
do.
don't want to see us getting any flack, either the council or us, with any controversial.
I'll take the flack, it's fine. Go
But do
ahead.
we want to change the language
Okay,
there
but
to
cover
reflect
it.
the resolution like the language in the resolution, which is a little bit more open, allows for density greater than 3.0?
That language is already, so it became part of the comprehensive plan last year when the city adopted the revitalization areas. That's where that kind of general
Okay.
language comes from.
But like, do we want to change what's in the box on page 10 to something more like that?
Are we talking about the strategy
Yeah.
paragraph?
Yeah, this,
It's where it says appropriate standards would include floor area ratios of 2.5 to 4.0?
because this is the proposed text that would be inserted.
Okay, so I think or higher is what we discussed.
Of
So it's
2.5 or higher? Yeah,
No,
that's
no,
simple.
2.5 to 4.0 or higher,
Oh, okay.
because that
That way it gives
indicates
a-
what Mr. Rankin
Which
said.
is technically in there, it's just confusing because it's after, we convert that to millions of square feet and it says or higher. I just want to make sure that I think the fact that we spend so much time right here talking about it and we're not totally clear what it's saying means it could be cleaned up a little bit. So I think if in the motion, we could ask city council or staff to clarify that, but that our intention is to indicate that the guidance should be 2.5 to 4.0 or higher, and we're not attempting to cap the FAR that would be considered.
I agree. Look, the comprehensive plan is our purview as planning commission, so let's make the changes we want.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Stevens, please proceed.
Yeah, I was just going to make a suggestion on the next item on page 7 where it says zoning text amendment. Several lines down, it says, to help support the cost of building a new high school. And there's no doubt that our interest in the economic development on the 10 acres is very much linked to helping support the schools, but that's not the only reason.
No, it's not.
For example, on page 9, down at the bottom goal, it says, provide a gateway to the city which instills a sense of place through the use of high-quality urban design, et cetera, et cetera. And those are all, to me, just as important, and certainly would be to groups like the Chamber of Commerce, who are very much in support of our overall efforts, but it's from the standpoint of how it supports the other businesses in the city. So
And
I don't want to wordsmith that here, but it just struck me that tying it to just this one reason,
they even crossed that one out.
yeah. I'd just make that suggestion.
So the language, as we just established, it's unimportant what it says on page 7. Where do you want to make the change? Where would you be interested in making the change within the box?
The third paragraph on page 10.
Third paragraph on page 10.
Actually, they kind of made the changes in the box. They already crossed out school and commercial, education and economic development. That was just changing the commercial to economic
Well,
development.
right, but here inside the box on page 10, this, whatever, third or fourth, depending on you count it, it says, strategy, consider and explore creating a tax increment financing district, business improvement district, community development authority, or similar financial mechanisms to generate tax revenue from economic development to support the debt service required to construct and maintain the schools and other infrastructure and amenities on the site. So that's the question, is that a strategy specific, or do we want to make that more generic? I don't know, doesn't matter to me too much. Because the tax increment financing, business improvement district, community development authority, those are all, as they say, financial mechanisms, specifically generate more than the normal amount of tax revenue. And I think those things all exist for a specific purpose. So I think the purpose would be for the school. So you don't have to do that. And that's not suggesting that all the tax revenue generated from that site would be used for the school. I mean, money's fungible, what difference does it make? But I do think if you're going to use one of these financial tools, which, I don't know, maybe somebody, staff could be more accurate with this, you need some reason for it. And it certainly seems like infrastructure on the site, which would be the new school, would be a reason for it. But and not just that, that's the way they say amenities on the site. Usually like a bid would be, tax overlay of a business district in order to do things like, hey, here's this public art or event that is funded by the thing. So Anyway, it seems fine to me.
It seems, I mean, for what it's worth, it seems fine to me. One is dealing with the specific tax increment financing, as opposed to the other one being the zoning text amendment. So I think they're, while similar, they're not exactly the same.
Yeah, maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing.
But they're both going to the same point, which is to help finance the schools. I think
Where's the tax amendment?
this is saying zoning text amendment.
Is that somewhere in here?
And this where, and the one that we were just referring to, this is to me, just the tax increment financing part. So, I mean, I agree with what Mr. Stevens said, but I've now been convinced that that text is less important than what's in the box. I mean, that's my view of it.
That's fine. I was kind of getting at a broader issue that there's a lot of benefits from
Yeah.
commercial development, and it may be true that the tax money that were derived from this is pretty much, whether on paper or in some other way, it's going to go to support the schools. But there are a lot of other benefits from commercial development there that we don't want to overlook. And I'm not sure where the best place to put that wording is, but
Yeah.
I only had one other comment.
Well, I mean, look, the top of that page 10, it says the goal, and to me, this seems like this is where I would want to put something like that, because I agree with what you're saying. This is to encourage creative proposals and successful economic development to offset school construction debt service. And I think you could add a phrase here, and
Provide other benefits.
provide other benefits to the city.
For the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, totally.
For the city.
Provide other community benefits, yeah, I think
Right.
that would help.
Yeah, I mean, in practice, it's inconsequential. I mean, whatever revenue is generated will be used by the city for whatever expenses we
Right.
have. But I definitely think in this because I agree with the general sentiment for this whole effort shouldn't just be, hey, we're doing all this just to build a school. I mean,
No.
presumably this economic development will be beneficial both in revenue generation, but also just experience and whatever for everybody. So I agree that having that be more.
Right, like I say, the Chamber of
consistent
Commerce, they look at it as it'll generate additional business for existing businesses
Right,
that
right.
Right.
are in the city.
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind more encompassing there.
I feel like, Mr. Stevens, you're going to be making this motion.
I don't know about that. I just had one other comment, and that's just thank you for, on page 10, down at the bottom, strategy, where it talks about the design of school buildings. And I know in previous versions of this, the high performance was only related to the 10 acres. And so now you've included the schools, and I think that'll be very helpful, especially in the future when we get a site plan for the schools, if we think they're lacking in high performance goals and strategies. So thank you for including that.
Any other comments? Okay. As I mentioned prior, we have seen this before. I think this is an important step towards our rezoning, a necessary step. It's good that we're finally designating the school area as such by putting these two flags. This has been brought up numerous times and appears to be a very important step in the process to indicate what can be built there. And, we've gone through this, and I support what's being proposed here with the modifications we've discussed. So, although this is a lot of text, I think we have discussed it at previous times. So I don't have any real comments other than this looks good to me. So if there's no other comments, we do need a motion. And we have talked about making some edits to page 10 in the goal section, and the other place was, on what page did I?
Page 7.
Page 7. Was it page 7? I thought it was,
I think they're both on page 10 if we want to do
yeah, page 10. We're also going to change, so it was
the
on
goal and the paragraph under that.
Yeah, exactly. The goal and then the strategy. So, someone please make a motion, Mr. Stevens?
Can I utilize the language?
You don't have to. If you don't want to make the motion, I'm just,
Yeah, because this is very long.
yeah.
Do the proposed motion.
Okay. I move that the Planning Commission recommends the City Council adopt Resolution TR 17-45 with the recommended changes to the proposed comprehensive plan text as indicated by underlined strike-through text and as amended by the amendments proposed by by Planning Commission on page 10.
And may I just clarify the additions that I had were on the goal after school construction debt service to add and other community benefits.
Check.
And then on that first strategy after the FARs to add or higher. Okay.
That's it.
Minor but important.
I'll second that motion. Any other?
All right, Ms. G, can you take a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Well done, Planning Commission, taking care of the comprehensive plan, and thank you to staff for all the work that was put into this. All right.
One step further.
Yeah, well, they're going to start coming in bunches. The steps are going to happen quicker and quicker. All right, we're on to the approval of minutes. We are moving right along.
I have no changes on either.
Yeah, oh, that's a good point. Are we, when we got sent the vision, the Falls Church vision twice, is that an item on the agenda? Is this the briefing on the community profile part, or this is just some attachment that was, I mean, I got a whole thing on the vision statement,
Right.
and I thought it was.
Is this a mistake or not, basically? We got additions of the vision, the community. Right.
Yeah, so under the,
Yeah.
the expectation is to provide a briefing under the director's report. It's the latest status on the community profile.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But not the vision, or that's part of it.
The vision is, the community profile is a follow-up to the vision. That's the reason both documents are included.
So we are still yet to, I don't want to, like, move quickly through the remaining items on the agenda and not get to this. It's
It'll be
included.
under the director's report.
Oh, God, okay, that's what I believed. Okay. Let's move to the minutes approval. We have 2 sets of minutes tonight. The ones first from November 20th, 2017, which I'm opening up right now. And anybody have any comments on these minutes?
Nope.
Everybody all at once. Okay. Do we need a second to review them again? It was a long time ago.
Actually, I have one, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm just noticing. I have one change on the 20th. On line 165, I was asking, the same thing I brought up tonight, I was asking the developer if they were going to utilize nutrient credits to capture stormwater. Just to be precise about what that is. Right, and the rest, her answer is accurate, so that's fine. But just, yeah, nutrient credit. Would utilize nutrient credits to capture stormwater. That's it.
And I just had on that same minutes, line 191, so just add an S to my last name, and it's Environmental Sustainability Council, and it would be ESC, same line.
All right.
I have one question. In the, I guess, like starting on line 337, where the item's open to the public, then we had a comment on, I believe, the Columbia Street.
Hold on. My document only goes to 223, so I'm confused.
I'm on the other one, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, just, can you hold your thought?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, unless I see any other comments, I'm good on these.
Oh, we're going to approve them separately? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to approve them separately.
I move we approve the minutes from November 20th, 2017 as amended.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? No? Okay. Moving on to the December 4th minutes. I'm
Okay, sorry
Ms.
about
Teets.
that.
Nope, I didn't make that clear if we were doing it that way.
I just thought we were going to try and do them together. So like on line 337, we open the item to the public. This is when we're talking about the lot on Lincoln. And then, so we have a comment from someone and then it's open to the public again. And so I think there's something, either that's been put in there twice, or, I think that's probably what it is, like the open to the public line on 350 probably just needs to be removed. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, it just,
Well, I mean, I agree, but there was, if I recall, there were separate, like I said, let's talk about this one issue first, and then everybody else wanted to talk about.
that's why I wondered if, like, was it Jefferson versus Lincoln? Because we did have a subdivision, wasn't it Jefferson?
Isn't that
was
a
another
debate
one?
or some kind
The Jefferson one, I think, was deferred for a different.
Right,
day.
but I think people were here, 'cause-
Yeah.
and so I think that's why I wondered, is either this doesn't belong here, or these are, one set of comments is referring to Jefferson, which may be the Cynthia Garner, because she lives at Cherry in Columbia, which is close to Jefferson,
First speaker was on
but,
a different issue than everybody else. I remember having two
Yeah,
piles
right.
here.
yeah, so,
Whatever. I opened it to the public twice. Is that what you want, or removing it is fine? I actually think the suggestion of
I think
removing
one
it-
is about Jefferson, the Jefferson one, and I think one is about Lincoln, but, yeah, because down here we have the East Jefferson subdivision continued, so maybe that first comment should be under that header, where it says on line 367.
They were all, but all those comments were given during that petition period,
Yeah.
the beginning.
Right.
Yeah,
So if you
you're
want
right.
to follow chronologically, I don't know how we normally would do it, but
Okay, well, at least they're all in there.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I don't need to, I'm okay with it saying I opened to the public twice.
Okay.
Generous. Ready for a motion?
No,
I have
no.
a couple quick tweaks. Line 297. I might have said that the page 2 of the plat was unusual, but I don't think I asked for pictures.
Yeah. You know what we did? We asked for I asked for pictures. He had suggested that there were many houses that would fit well in there. And I suggested if that was true, I'd like to see pictures of said houses.
So maybe
So that
you-
was me.
Sure.
You did not ask for pictures, I did.
all right. And then while we're at it, on line 292, what I was saying was that once we create the lot, it would be there for a very long time. Not that the person would live there for a long time, but that the subdivision would create a lot that would be there for a very long time.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, this is minor, but on line,
Hold on, Mrs. G, do you know what the change is here? I mean, I know what the intent is and that's correct, but do you know what words you're shifting based on his?
Right,
okay.
that the lot would be there for a very long time instead of the house would be, or the owner would be occupying it for a long time, just that the lot would be there.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, sure. On 299, I suggested Lot A could be smaller. It's still unclear to me what amount of control we have over specifying how they subdivide, but we are talking about trying to make the lots more reasonable or more normal, and the math just suggested Lot A could be smaller, and Lot B could be bigger, and then that would solve that, which actually relates to jumping all the way to 360. I think in this part, I was talking about this idea that if you did do that, made one lot smaller and the other lot bigger, that it would then straddle the existing structure, and so that would have to be demolished. So I think the subdivision can be made without demolishing the existing structure, but not with the adjustment that I was contemplating. So I don't know.
Well, you asked if the intent was to demolish the house, and you
Yeah, I
said
don't wanna-
yes.
and-
And then you said, then you could move the line.
Yeah, so I don't want to indicate that the particular subdivision they proposed, I don't think would necessarily require the existing structure to demolish, although it sounds like that's their intention. But the idea I proposed would have, so I don't know if that detail matters that much. That's all I got. so it looks perfect.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Hockenberry, you can make your motion
Okay.
now.
I move that we adopt the minutes of December 4th, 2017 with noted changes.
Second?
Oh, me too, babe.
What?
Gonna be in the newspaper for approving the minutes?
Wow, two. And one was for December, one was for November.
Whoa, whoa. We did change the comp plan earlier. That was cool.
I think he might have been listening.
He's gonna peg that picture as
I think
we're
he
talking about.
might have been listening.
That'll be fake news. Fake news.
Ms. G, can you take, never mind, what am I talking about? All those in favor of the
Aye.
motion for December 4th, 2017
Aye, aye.
minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? Approved. Okay, any planning commission reports?
Just a short one for me.
I have one after her.
I attended the community forum for the new school on the 13th, and Mr. Stevens did also. And it was fairly well attended for this time of year. I think also to note that there were quite a few, I'd say maybe 4 different development teams there that night that I picked up on, and also that the superintendent noted that the attendance for the RFQ that day was very, very well attended by a lot of people, a lot of developers and architects.
Does that conclude your remarks?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all I've done.
I thought you might be interested to know that the issues with the Sycamore subdivision have been resolved now. It was determined that the house was located incorrectly, although that was determined in July and it continued on and on and on. So the adjacent neighbors and the developer came to an agreement that the neighbors would not, I guess basically not come in and suggest they shouldn't get a variance, and the developer went to the BZA and was able to get a variance for the fact that the house isn't in the proper location. So I guess the good thing that happened out of it is that it's very much confirmed that the city of Falls Church does not allow for errors in the location of the house. And therefore, if there's an error, you would have to go and get a variance from the BZA. I'm not sure, the thing with variances is they're supposed to be a hardship-based. I'm not sure exactly how much of a hardship it is when the developer was told in July before he started building that it was incorrect. But he did have one surveyor saying one thing, another surveyor another, and it took them months to figure it out. So anyway, but the good news is like there was an agreement and the neighbors are happy with the agreement, or I don't know if happy, they're satisfied with the agreement. And the developer did get a variance. And I think that's good. So in the future, when this happens, we know that this is something that a variance is needed for.
Actually, I talked to John Boyle about that, and he indicated to me that, because it's very common in our neighboring jurisdictions that they have a process to approve errors, both administratively, up to, actually, for example, in Fairfax, errors can be approved by the zoning administrator up to 10% of the measurement involved. Greater than 10%, it can be approved by the BZA. And so I've shared those, as a sample, and I know he's considering looking at that to bring it to city council as a text amendment, as an ordinance amendment.
Right.
I guess we would see that as well, as a possibility. I know they're looking at that as a way to formalize the process. I think the biggest issue was we didn't have a formalized, adopted process to handle these types of things. And it's very common in building that you'll be off, by inches. Sometimes you're off by more than that, but most jurisdictions have a way to handle it that's fair and equitable and transparent. And ours, was kind of done informally over the years, and maybe decades ago, that was okay in a small town, but in today's day and age, that really doesn't work. So I think they're looking at fixing that problem.
Right, and I had suggested, I don't know if you guys remember, a few months ago, I had said if we were going to allow for errors, then we needed to have a policy and a code to back up that policy, just like Fairfax County has. But to make it clear, Arlington does not allow for errors, and they're much bigger than us. So it's a choice as a jurisdiction if we allow for it or not. I do think that we probably would be better off with some kind of code related to it, rather than, yeah.
Can I ask a question about the whole thing? Because, they gave us a handout at the meeting. I hadn't had a chance to read it before they gave the public comment. Was there an improvement that could have been made? Like, we did the subdivision, and I remember the debate, like, if I recall, we could have not done the subdivision, and this same mistake could have occurred.
Right,
Like,
I
we
think in
didn't
this-
actually
Right.
cause this mistake, but there were other things about procedurally and checking boxes and provide, like, is this an indication that we need to tighten up some part of the
well-
process?
Well, I would just say, I know that their issue was that they felt like a proper wall check had not been done. So wall check, that they had gone to Fairfax County, and on the properties related to Fairfax County, that the Fairfax County had had a wall check done and had the documents to show it, and that they were never able to get the city to provide that. And they basically felt that the planning commission shouldn't have signed off on a subdivision, or, I don't know, not the subdivision, but that the city shouldn't have signed off on the building until they had a wall check done. So that was their bone of contention.
I don't
That's
know what a
kind of-
wall check is.
It's basically saying that when you
wall
put
is.
in the foundation, that it's located in the right place before you start putting a house in there.
But, for example, that,
Right.
I assume happened well after
Yes,
we had
I mean,
anything. to
yeah,
do with it.
exactly.
No, it did
Yeah.
happen well after we did. I just thought it's an informative for us.
No, I know, and all I'm saying is, like,
You need to
they
change the
seem to have
code.
some beef with what we did, and I was trying to figure out what did we
Right.
do wrong that we could have done differently. A wall check wouldn't have.
Well,
because
no,
that
we
was
we
well
relied
after
on the
we-
surveys and the plans that we were presented with. I think in this area, too, you have to remember, this neighborhood, the lots were platted out over 100 years ago.
Yeah,
These are like
totally.
1908 or 1910. Ellison Heights is one of the oldest subdivisions, in town. There are a couple others of that vintage.
1699?
Well, no, but we're getting pretty old for subdivisions. In those days, it was done by deed, and they used chains and rods, and they went out and marked it and
A
put
couple of mules, and sure. I know.
and they put stones in the ground, and so
Pins and
survey. So
bars are,
you have different survey. So I've heard that you have different surveyors that they don't all line up. The monuments
Sure.
that mark the corners in Ellison Heights.
They
You
could
start on
move.
one side of the neighborhood, like on West Street, and work your way towards Haycock Road. Eventually, things shift, and so in this case, he was off by his surveyor had one measurement. They had hired a surveyor, and they were like 6 or 10 inches apart on where the line actually was, and so.
And the funny thing to me.
Those kind of things can happen.
is the whole dispute may not have happened, except he came to them and said, I'm taking your fence down.
Yeah, so I guess.
And so that
Alright,
kind of
so I still don't
facilitated
feel,
that
and maybe you
dispute.
guys can't answer the question, maybe this is for.
Well, I can
this
tell you-
for-
I can tell you what
Should
they're-
we have asked the staff to have double-checked something? Like, what?
Well,
That's what they felt. If you read their,
I read their thing, I was like, I don't know, it seemed like the staff came and said all this stuff, and we said, sounds good.
I asked them what it meant.
One
and
at a
they-
time, we're talking over everybody.
Yeah, I know. I asked them what they meant, and they felt like not all the proper paperwork had been given to the city, and that we should have been aware that that it wasn't, I think it's very difficult. It's like, we look at the surveys that we receive.
right, we have to rely on what a licensed surveyor, licensed by the Commonwealth,
Right.
stamps and seals and provides, and staff is in that position too. I mean, they can't assume that the survey is wrong. They have to assume that it's sealed by a professional, that it's correct. And so some of it is a private matter. A lot of boundary disputes, are civil matters. The city was kind of involved almost as a third party related to the construction, but, I think there was, a lot of it had to do just.
Right,
with the
because
dispute
this
between
error
parties.
could have happened without a subdivision.
Correct.
They could have built
Correct.
on that lot and
Right.
made this mistake.
And that line didn't change. The line
Yeah,
between their
exactly.
property
We
and his
didn't move
property,
that line, right,
that
yeah.
line, was not proposed, was not moved around by anything we did,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
but
they-
perhaps
Mrs.
lessons
Hockenberry.
learned, from it is whenever we're dealing both with the city and the county to do some double checking. on
Maybe, but I
stuff,
think-
Because that can get messed up when you're so in line there.
Yeah, and I think, part of their problem with the city is they felt like there should have been a stop work issued when the lot lines, when the wall check wasn't done and when it wasn't shown to be properly located, and given the time to resolve it. And then that way the house wouldn't have been built in correctly, and then a variance wouldn't have been needed and all this stuff. But anyway, I think, like I said a few months ago, I think the main thing here is we need to look at, is there code that we need to be adding? Do we need to have a policy here?
Nonetheless, I think we should extend a note of thanks to Commissioners Teets and Krasner for going the extra mile to try to make that neighbor a little happier in a difficult situation.
Right, absolutely. And I do have one other thing, my apologies. I really was very interested in Mr. Snyder's email today talking about the affordable housing, what did he put it? But preservation or conservancy, that was the word, conservancy. And that I really would like to have a report on that from somebody in Arlington fairly soon, because I know that the Housing Commission is looking at all kinds of ways of trying to do things also. So if we do have it, we need to make sure the Housing Commission is invited also, or any other interested parties, because that's a very important thing.
Okay.
We did have one of those economic working group meetings, which has school and city people in it about the campus site. And I know the meeting ended, as most of the meetings end, with us debating when to rezone the site. Were you there for, what else did we talk about? We talked about that for a while, and I didn't bring my notes, it was 2 weeks ago, but I think it was also just the what do you call it, governance of it. They're going to form some new group, and they were talking about who would be members and would we have an at-large member. I think you were at the meeting. How come everyone here was at the meeting? No one remembers what we talked about.
Well, I think one of the things, there was some proposals to have an overall project manager, and I think both the city side and the school side have kind of are not positively disposed towards that, and want to keep this coordinating committee pretty much as proposed.
Yeah.
So I think that committee that we all were on is now defunct.
I mean,
It's been declared that,
well,
but
I mean,
I just
the
get that
meeting,
feeling.
during the meeting, it was indicated there would be future meetings, so
Stay tuned.
I'm awaiting notification of future meetings.
How exciting.
Although it did seem like it was going to be reconstituted with the city would have a group, the schools would have a group, there'd be some overlap.
Downsized.
Like the superintendent of the schools would be on the city group, the city manager would be on the schools group, but I don't know. I assume city council will sort that out soon.
Yes. Okay. No other planning commissioner reports. Let's move on to the planning director's report. And the Vision 2040.
Thank you, Commissioners. Actually, before I get to Vision 2040, I also want to mention one item that was pulled together this afternoon. It's an information item to talk about some transportation grants that have been prepared recently or are actively being prepared. Ms. G, do you know if those materials were distributed?
Yes, this one.
Oh, great. It is titled Grant Application Supporting Campus Redevelopment in West Falls Church Metro. This is provided as an information item for the Planning Commission. One, in your role, helping to plan for redevelopment there, but also in your role as overseeing the city's capital improvement program, CIP. What's included in the memo, and I'll walk through some of the information because I know it was distributed late today. The first paragraph there is talking about the importance of external funds for the city's transportation projects and through all of the grant sources that are available. The end result of that first paragraph is that for each one local dollar that's invested in transportation, that turns into somewhere between $4 and $10 of actual project money because of the grants that are out there. The second paragraph is talking about why the city's applications in recent years have done so well, and it's really a two-pronged approach. The first is that the city regionally is sitting in a transportation crossroads for multimodal options. That's actually the reason the city exists in the first place, is that it's at a historic crossroads of two highways. Now it's at a crossroads of two metro lines, and it sits on the W&OD trail as well. So there are a number of multimodal transportation options that are coming through or going near the city. The second prong of why the city's applications do so well is because of continued reinvestment and redevelopment in the city. That a lot of competitive programs look to match or pair public dollars with private dollars. So there is a scoring category in many of these grant applications for how much activity is active, how many projects are coming through, what's their state, how close are they to going to construction. That the state is trying to pair its dollars with economic development. And so long as that activity continues within the city's grant applications will continue to be received positively. The next section talks about recent applications that have been applied for or are active, specifically within the joint redevelopment area. 3 applications are listed in the table. One that was already submitted, Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Program. This is to get a better pedestrian crossing along Haycock Road. Expected construction costs are about $750,000. This could include a pedestrian-activated signal with a full array of overhead lights. It basically operates as a traffic signal for pedestrian traffic. Second is about $15.5 million through Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, NVTA 70% regional funds. And this would supply a number of multimodal transportation improvements along both Route 7 as well as Haycock Road, implementing wider sidewalks, better crossings, redesigning the intersection geometry, providing lighting that provides for safety throughout the day. The third application listed in the table is through the I-66 Commuter Choice Program. That is the name for the program that's being funded out of the I-66 inside the Beltway toll revenue. What's being applied for here is specifically a reconstruction of the intersection of Route 7 and Haycock Road / Shreve Road. That intersection is, bulk of it is in Fairfax County. The I-66 Commuter Choice Program is a good revenue source for projects that go into other jurisdictions. The application is pending, and the reason I say pending is because the deadline is this Friday, and we're pulling together final materials this week. All of these funds, the city staff is expecting to bring these funds online in fiscal year 21. The reason for asking for fiscal year 21 funds is to align with the planning process for the school redevelopment area. We don't want to be in a position of designing something and then have to redesign it based on the final layout of the redevelopment. I think in FY21, if we can get the awards this year, that will still be compelling or certainly appreciated by a private developer who's looking for ways to offset some of those public improvement costs. Ultimately, any dollars you can bring into this project increases the value of the land because the developer would no longer be on the hook for those development costs. Also included, attached to the memo is a complete list of all the applications that have either been submitted this year, will be submitted this year, or submitted in future years. And the reason for laying out future year grant applications is to make sure that funding needs within the adopted CIP are met. That's what's included in that fairly complicated looking 2-page spreadsheet that's attached. I'm happy to take any questions on that item if there are any.
So these top 3 we find out next June if we get them?
Correct. Typically the application season for transportation grants begins in the fall, then it runs through the winter, and then awards are made in time for the beginning of the fiscal year.
Thank you. I haven't had really a time to digest this complicated spreadsheet, as you said.
The spreadsheet is there for information. It may help to let you know the process by which the spreadsheet is developed. So each year the city amends or adopts or updates its CIP, and immediately upon adoption of that CIP, staff gets to work in making sure that grant applications are lined up to meet any funding needs in the CIP. So this grant application schedule is designed to deliver on the CIP, and then we make adjustments if projects are either reprioritized throughout the year or new projects that weren't included in the CIP, like campus redevelopment, are in need of funding support. So the primary design principle behind this is supporting the CIP and then making adjustments throughout the year as needed. And we amend this each time that the CIP is amended.
Yes, I see. I do see that. So I haven't totaled up the local share amount. All these grants, as we've talked about at many CIP meetings, have typically great leverage, somewhere between 7 to 1 or 10 to 1, if I recall. The local share, as captured in the spreadsheet, do we have a total column and I missed it? Or, I mean, what are we saying we're on the hook for if these come through?
I'm sorry, I don't have that total calculated as of yet. I can say that the local share is already included in the CIP projections, so it's not an additional burden beyond what's projected. And some of the applications that were not previously considered in the CIP require no local match. For specifically some of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Program, BPSP, as well as some of these NVTA 70% applications. So where we add applications, we typically tend to add them when they have no local match requirement.
Any other questions on this? Yeah.
Looking on the second page here with the South Washington POA, the section for the Annandale Road and South Washington Street intersection, and that's slated for 1920. Now, how will that affect the status of what we're doing there, and what is going to get done with what we're doing now, and what is going to have to wait until this funding, or how does that work?
Sure. If I understand the question, it's about the applications within the South Washington POA, and specifically that line item for Annandale Road and South Washington. And I think what you're asking about is the connection to the intermodal plaza and the streetscape work that's being done.
And even a slight update to what's going on down there, you know, how much is really going to be accomplished, or I was just seeing this and saying, wow, what's going to have to wait until fiscal year 19 or 20?
Sure.
That was my question. Yeah.
So the construction that construction is active, and that will complete the project, picking up where the Tinner Hill, the Lincoln at Tinner Hill project left off, and going to I think about 100 or 200 feet short of this intersection with Annandale Road. That was the phase one design for the public aspects of that project. So it'll include streetscape, utility undergrounding, the intermodal plaza from the Tinner Hill project to just short of Annandale Road. The idea for these other projects is to fill in the gaps for those things. So there's a separate project that will reconstruct the intersection of South Washington and South Maple. This would be a separate project to reconstruct Annandale and South Maple. So the idea is to take that investment that's already started and then continue attaching until you get to the logical endpoints.
Okay, so this would be up more in the space along with the bowling alley, that section there.
Yes, there's
Over
also
to-
that section of
over
taking
to
it
South
into
Washington.
Maple Avenue.
Yeah. When is the completion date in mind for, you know, it's been seeming like it's been coming along pretty well. South
Yeah, I
Washington
understand that
Street.
the utility undergrounding work is active. I could reach out and get an estimated, a better estimate on the completion date.
I saw them finishing off some sidewalk work there today and brushing it all off, and I think that's what they were doing, and that was, you know, amazing to see, because it didn't seem like it really disrupted the world as much as I thought it would. Of course, we still haven't gotten into that new piece by going past the Coleman Sport either.
Correct.
Yeah.
I suspect that there will be some messages about that from people who weren't paying attention.
Thank you.
That's artfully said.
I had a question. Is it common for these 3 grants that we're working on right now, or that are in, to request them in future years like that? And does that have any impact on our chances of getting them? And then also, is there ever any flexibility if that year is approaching and we want to delay it a year or move it up a year? Is there flexibility there, or is it all kind of locked in?
So it's a multi-part question. The first thing is about applying for out-year funds. That's a very common thing, and in fact, some programs even restrict you to applying for out-year funds. For example, Regional Surface and Transportation Program, RSVP, those require you to apply for year 6. And then there's also Smart Scale. Generally, applications are for year 5 and 6. And then NVTA is still working out the mechanics of their program. So out-year applications are typical. In fact, VDOT is moving to every other year applications for a lot of their programs that they had. And there are good administrative and timing reasons to do it, because typically if you're getting your award in June and you're supposed to start spending that money in July, well, somehow between the middle of June and July, everybody's supposed to stand up their project agreements. That doesn't work. And so they were building into their schedule a 3 or 4 month delay. By doing a 2-year award cycle, they can reduce the burden on application preparation and also provide more certainty about funding availability. So in terms of out-year applications, that's not a problem. In terms of the flexibility of spending funds, generally the money is not available before you ask for it because everyone's doing their fiscal planning based on you needing those funds when you say you will. Typically, there is some leeway to delay construction or performance. There's often some requirement, either 2 years or 3 years, to really spend the money.
All right, a couple of comments. The first is, I think you mentioned 2 reasons why Falls Church has been successful at winning grants. I think a third is to staff. I think that you guys do an amazing job putting these together, and one of the reasons we are successful is because of the thoroughness and work of you and others on the planning staff.
Absolutely.
I do want to take that as an intro to mention other folks. The folks who are actually preparing the grant applications this year, it's Carrie Odinino and Jeff Sykes in the planning shop, and also we've got a lot of support from Gina Freiberg this year down in Public Works. I say down in because they're on the first floor, we're on the third. It does take a tremendous amount of work to put these things through. It's often coordinating within City Hall as well as communicating with Planning Commission, CACT, City Council, and often across jurisdictions and agency lines as well. So it is a tremendous amount of work, and I do appreciate the work that those two in particular have put in, Carrie and Jeff.
Yeah, well, thank you to Carrie and Jeff. But this is an impressive list, and our success rate is fantastic and enviable, I suspect. So again, thank you for all that work. That's my comments on this, and I suspect we'll see some of these, the scheduled ones on the CIP, coming up in the next month.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the CIP is scheduled to make its process through the Planning Commission, and you will see a lot of these transportation projects in the CIP, as well as an update on where city staff is on delivering the previously approved projects.
Okay. And while I have you at the microphone, can you give me an update on the Capital Bike Share? I thought that was months ago. I thought December was sort of where we were targeting, unless I got remembering that wrong.
Do you mean for a rollout?
Yeah.
For a rollout, what we've been targeting is spring of next calendar year. Typically with active transportation projects like bike share, active transportation, pedestrian and bicycle, spring is generally a better time to roll those things out because that gives...
Was something happening in December, like final decisions on locations, or there was something happening in December?
Yes, so in December, city staff is submitting the NEPA paperwork, the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA paperwork that's required because it's federal funding on the station locations for Phase 1 versus Phase 2 of implementation. That's the information packet that was previously presented and a subject of a City Council public hearing. The majority of the stations are going forward. We ran into some right-of-way issues with a couple of the stations. So I think the stations at the Eden Center along Northwest Street, those two I think are both going to be delayed until Phase 2 of the project. But the others I believe are all moving forward in Phase 1.
Phase 1, I feel like in total we had 14 stations. I'm doing this off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's
Phase
13
1
or 14. It's
the majority, though, were happening in Phase 1.
Yes, yeah, the intent was to get all of them in Phase 1. On Eden Center, we ran into a stumbling block about federal requirements and right-of-way of permanent easement versus movable easement versus revocable easement. And at the end of the day, we couldn't come to a piece of language that was jointly agreeable by everybody. And then the hang-up with Northwest Street is that there was public acceptance for the proposed bike share location as part of the Mason Row project. We didn't want to show a station there because that area is going to get closed off during construction, so we were trying to find another location, and we couldn't find one that was, again, jointly acceptable by all parties involved.
Okay, so the plan now is spring. We're going to see bikes in spring. That's the plan.
What we're aiming for is spring. Any time before the weather gets too hot is what we're really hoping for, so that people can get used to using these bikes. Because it turns out that once people get used to biking, they figure out how to handle the weather. So long as you don't give them the 1-2 punch of having to figure out biking and figure out weather at the same time, people can do it. I point out that Madison, Wisconsin, and the Twin Cities in Minnesota are two of the most popular cities for biking in the country, and they probably have some of the worst weather. So at least in terms of cold. So if they can figure it out, I'm sure we can too.
Well, I do hope that maybe in the future we can figure out the Eden Center location.
Yes.
Because there's bike share at the East Falls Church Metro, and it would be really nice to have bike share there because you see people walk between the two all the time. And it's a natural location.
Yeah, that's been an ongoing conversation, not just the Eden Center, but the entire Seven Corners redevelopment, having conversations at the staff level with Fairfax County about ways to better utilize Roosevelt Sycamore as a transportation link between the East Falls Church Metro and that area. That generally there's very little congestion, meaning there's a lot of capacity that could be taken advantage of, whether it's for bikes or pedestrians or transit or autos to connect those two areas.
Well, that's my shortcut to Arlington. I like that it's not crowded.
And I thought the Northwest Street, you guys were using Nova Park's land, because there's that extra triangle of land. I thought that's where it was going to go.
Nova Parks had some reservations about using the park land itself. The hang-up is that bike share is available 24 hours a day, and Nova Parks is really trying to set the message that the park does close at 9 p.m. And so they were finding a little bit of inconsistency in the idea of putting a bike share location on the park.
So where's it going to go? What other options do we have?
Well, so there was existing street right-of-way, and again, the street there exists by easement with Nova Parks. Nova Parks owns the land, and the city is there by permission. So there was thought about putting it on the blacktop with appropriate flexi-post protection and reflectors and striping. There was some concern from the neighbors about how that would function. So instead, what we're looking at is whether we can work those out as part of Phase 2, which would happen about a year after Phase 1, or do it in conjunction with, if it goes to construction, the Mason Row project. The proposal there that was included in their conceptual development plan was along Park Avenue.
I wonder, I don't know if BJ's is exactly right, but BJ's, the whole back of their parking lot that's against Wilson is empty most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not exactly perfect, but they always seem much more cooperative when you talk to them. They don't.
Oh, it was, I don't want to say that the Eden Center was not cooperative, they were. I think there was a little bit of sticking point that we can make it an easement that can move, but what has to happen from the federal standpoint is that it has to be permanent on the site, and that was the sticking point.
Right, and I guess cooperative wasn't the right word. I guess more open parking might be the better word. Because Eden Center is packed all the time.
Yeah.
And BJ's does have a lot of capacity that there's never any cars in.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what Phase 2 will allow us to do, is to look at more opportunities. Phase 1, for the purpose of Phase 1, there is a restriction in the NEPA process that restricted staff to looking at only locations that were as approximately shown to council at the public hearing, that we showed a recommended location with, I think, a 400-foot radius. So long as we're within that 400-foot radius, we can stay on Phase 1. If we don't have that 400-foot radius, which for BJ's, it would be outside, we're moving back to Phase 2.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fuller, do you have any other comments to add to, or you have more?
The community profile.
The whole community profile, of course.
And then I have some of the follow-ups.
Take a brief.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yeah.
In your packets is a cover memo as well as 2 attachments on the first annual community profile. I want to spend some time just highlighting some of the points in the staff memo. So this is a request tonight for you all to review the draft community profile. This was previously presented to you on October 2nd in your meeting that night. And this profile is billed as a follow-up to the vision chapter. It's actually the one action item that came out of that chapter was to produce this annual profile. The Falls Church 2040 is the updated vision chapter, which has a very, I think, progressive and forward-looking vision statement, which I'll go ahead and read out loud for context. In the year 2040, the City of Falls Church is a welcoming and inclusive community, a special place in the heart of Northern Virginia. Involved citizens are key to the city's long-term success as a leader in education, environmental sustainability, multimodal transportation, and vibrant economic development. By investing in neighborhoods, community services and facilities, schools, and parks, the city preserves small-town character and history while honoring a deep commitment to progress and a growing community. The continual rejuvenation of robust commercial areas supports the city's high quality of life for all citizens.
Could not have said it better myself.
Thank you.
Well done.
Included in that vision statement are 8 supporting core values, and those are listed in the memo: small town character in an urban setting, and then 3 aspects of sustainability: economic, environmental, and inclusiveness, and then 4 core services that municipalities look to provide: education, mobility and accessibility, public health and safety, and a responsive and accountable governance. Also included in the adopted chapter was this idea of community indicators, the idea of tracking over time progress toward achieving this vision and these values. So to that end, developing the draft profile, the first step was collecting the draft indicators in the chapter itself. Second was going out and looking at other communities. How are other communities reporting progress year over year? Collecting data from various offices and departments throughout City Hall. And then finally reaching out to outside data sources, primarily the American Community Survey, which is provided through the U.S. Census Bureau. In terms of process, this is expected to be administrative publication, so it won't be something that staff is looking for actions on from Planning Commission or Council, although endorsements would certainly be welcome. The idea is to get the publication out by January 1 of the next calendar year, which is just in a couple weeks. And the reason for pushing for that early January publication date is so that this community profile can be part of the organizational meetings of the various boards and commissions, including the Planning Commission. I'd like to go ahead and step through the draft profile. And I think first I'll say that this is intended to be a document with a lot of audiences, that there is some basic factual information that comes up again and again. So this is certainly something that could be used by boards and commissions, the staff, the general public as part of discussion about ongoing projects and where the city's headed. I think this can also be used as a document to tell new residents what's going on in the city, what is this place about. And then also people who are interested in investing in the city. If someone's interested in redeveloping a parcel or they're interested in setting up a restaurant and they need basic information about the city, this can be a resource for them as well. The profile is separated into various sections. All are exactly 1 page long. That's by design. It talks a little bit about the city, the history of the city, where it came from. It talks a little bit about the city's growing population, and then there is 1 page for each of those core values listed in the vision chapter, which I will not go through. And then it closes with a map of the larger Falls Church region, Falls Church area within the metro region. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Questions, comments?
Can we provide suggestions on the profile?
Absolutely. You can do it tonight or in writing later.
I have 2 suggestions. I can
Let's see if,
cover them pretty quickly if now.
see a version 23 coming.
That was always expected.
On page 2, it says a year in review. I would suggest adding another one that says the city adopted a resolution setting a goal of reducing citywide greenhouse gas emissions 80% below 2005 levels by 2050. That's driving a number of actions related to climate-related issues. And then also on page 6,
From the wrong document or something.
under energy on that page, it reads now Falls Church has its own recycling center and citywide annual recycling rate is 60%. I mean, that's good, but that's not really energy. So I would suggest that we add something about the Department of Energy study that they performed for us to prove in the value of geothermal for the high school. And that's it.
Should we, if we're meant,
Be a different title.
That looks like recycling.
It's not, it's, yeah,
and if we're mentioning recycling, should
Environmental.
we comment on the recent implementation of
Well, I like that.
food waste collection?
but not for that.
Fairly significant.
Sure, absolutely.
This is visually very, very well done.
Thank you. It was an effort of a lot of staff, and I think one of the things that staff is finding very easy to work with is this new format we've been using for the small area plans, for the comp plans, for the master plans. 8.5 by 11 makes it easy to print. Landscape makes it easy to see on a computer. It also makes it really easy to read because the columns aren't so
Right.
wide, and you have nice space for pictures.
Good use of space.
Yep. Thank you.
Ms. Dietz?
Yeah, I was going to say, this has really become the standard for a lot of research reports, because I'm a director of research, I write a lot of reports, and it used to be, all my reports were between 40 and 100 pages with lots of footnotes, and now I have to do everything landscape with lots of pictures, or people will not read them. So this is a nice standard, because it does allow for more graphics. You know what I thought was really missing? It's the only thing really that I saw missing, because otherwise it's really well done. And I'm not sure if it belongs in a small town character, but you don't really mention the number of nonprofits and community groups here. We have a lot, because I think I have like 10 memberships in my pile of bills right now. So Falls Church Arts and VPAS and Falls Church Housing Corp, the Winter Shelter Group, the Falls Church Education Foundation, all of those groups really enrich the city. I've been going to lots of holiday events at various ones. Maybe even to mention the fact that I don't think I saw a mention of the news press, that we actually have a community newspaper. So I think those things are part of our small town character, is that we do have a lot of volunteer groups doing a lot of things. And I will mention, just because I do it, and maybe we could put it in environmental sustainability, we do have, what are we at now? 10 years running, and we have a habitat restoration team that we did 11 events in our city parks this year to take out invasive plants and put back in natives. And we've had a special project going on in the Howard Herman Stream Valley Park. After the daylighting, we've put thousands of native plants back in there. So there's a real active, and that's an active community group too. So anyway, and because I kind of run part of the volunteer part of it, I do it a lot, but anyway, I just wanted to mention it.
It's rather extensive when you really think of it, and the nonprofit groups that we have here in the city.
It really is. And I think like the Habitat Restoration is a good example of the staff working with volunteers, and VPAS came in and gave us plant money to help us, and so that was a community group came in and helped there. We get Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops that help us. We get
And high school.
high school. Well, the high school guys need community service, so we have the high school. The high schoolers come in and help run the VPAS booth at the farmers market, because they need honor society, or they need hours for their IB diploma, and some students just help us. And so it's nice the way the community groups all work together.
We're amazing.
I think that's one of the things the profile does, is that it talks about all the good things that are happening in the city. I think otherwise people sometimes forget everything that everyone's contributing.
And we do have the wildlife, the citywide wildlife habitat
Right.
certification. And so that took us 10 years to get. So,
And that's a very nice butterfly over at the community center.
yeah, it is. And the reason that takes a while is that you have to have a certain number of backyards
Right.
registered, a certain number of public areas, schools, parks. And it just takes a while to get the number in. And we did that. That was pretty much all done with volunteer people. So there's some really strong things we've done as a
You want to
community.
mention that? No.
Incredible Planning Commission, et cetera, et cetera.
On page 3 about the population stuff, first of all, it's probably hard to get good data, but I noticed one error under the population by age range and year. We've got 25 to 44 twice. I think the orange one is supposed to be 18 to 24. Or 19 to 24.
So that we've got an overlap, sure.
Yeah, that's just a typo, I think. And I was actually wondering about this statement. I think maybe it's not actually right. In recent years, there has been a decrease in the white and African American populations. Is that the percentage, or has there actually been a decrease in the absolute population of white and African Americans?
Well,
The chart
I
showing
can confirm
percentage.
whether that's talking about the percentages or the absolute numbers.
I guess I'd be surprised if the absolute, because the overall growth has been,
It's probably an estimate, because we're in between census, right? So that's got to be just like a,
yeah, that was, I mean, that's the other thing,
Estimate,
it's,
right?
then there's this chart with the Hispanic, it's kind of, I don't know. It's odd that the.
just cite your
Hispanic
data sources, I
population's
guess, if you're
broken
going to do that. I guess you do have a page in the back, just
out. Yeah,
cite,
they said this.
cite your data,
Yeah.
if you're going to include
We
data.
did cite the data.
Yeah, I see,
and-
yeah, household
Yeah,
compare,
I
yeah.
don't like.
Yeah.
The American Community Survey, right, which
Yeah.
is,
I mostly just, I think that it's,
necessary.
I think it's interesting to have data and charts. To me, if they're not telling a story or, people don't understand what they mean, then they're not super valuable. But I would just confirm, the one thing I would just confirm is if the actual population of whites and African Americans has decreased, that's interesting. But if what we're really saying is the percentage has decreased, which this chart clearly shows, then we should just tweak that to make it accurate. Otherwise, this thing looks pretty cool.
Speaking of tweaks, since Andy was talking about that specific paragraph, the fonts are a little different. I mean, this is so small, but it does it a couple times. It does in this population part, and it does it in the history, housing costs. It just switches. I mean, it's such a small thing. You were.
just do some final editing, you'll catch it.
Yeah, and, right, I don't know where we're at in the process. If you wanted to release it
Just
January
squeeze it into a
1st,
page.
then there's one picture that says Getty Images on it. I thought that should
Yeah.
go.
Clean up those images, yeah.
Yeah, these are such small things.
Not enough pictures of the planning commission. I think Nick just got.
Anything else? Mr. Fuller, you said you wanted to, Mr. Stoddard, you're finished with the?
That is correct.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much. It looks great. I just moved right on. Music stopped. Thank you very much. We've reviewed this
It didn't?
a couple times. It's great.
Self-driving cars thing.
Mr. Fuller.
Just wanted to update you, our next meeting will be administrative meeting on Tuesday, January 2nd. We'll also be having election of officers and appointments to boards and commissions, and we'll have an annual report for you to also look at. Then on January 16th, also Tuesday, we have one of our speaker series with the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, and then we'll have a public hearing on a major mixed-use project, the Broad in Washington project. So that'll be for you that evening as well. Then in February, you'll have the CIP starting up on your agenda for a while.
Do we know where these meetings will be happening?
Ooh, you stole my bullet.
At this point, we'll
Oh, sorry.
notify you where there's several options, community center and some others. So we're not sure yet either, so we will
long as they're
obviously
heated.
let you know in advance. So,
That would be good, and the public as well.
Right, right.
So January 2nd, we are still planning on being here, or this is it? This is our final one?
I don't believe we'll be here.
We will not be here. Okay,
The
so,
things
Where will we
labeled-
be?
The things labeled
We don't know yet.
disposal,
No one has told us.
Make sure it has heat.
the things labeled disposal, can I take those home? That desk says disposal on the side, so does that one.
Oh,
Can I have them?
I think
Disposal,
I don't know what just happened here.
Auction they do, but you
Oh,
know,
okay.
you can always
I'll come
query.
bid on them.
disposal.
I mean, just take it home, basically.
Anything that's not nailed down. Just microphones, name tag.
I have a truck if you want to borrow it. Right in here, grab it.
all right, so the sooner the better on location for
Yes.
both
That's
us and the
definitely, I
public.
mean, if we knew, we'd tell you now, but
Of
we're
course.
still in progress, so I'm figuring all that out.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
speaking of Founder's Row,
Yes.
where are we?
They have a new project manager on it. The other gentleman went to another company. He's been in contact with staff. He's met with us. They're moving forward in earnest, and we should see something shortly. The holdup was Golden Sachs is the mother company of the theater operator, and the contract details has taken months because of that. So anyway, so But it should wrap up very shortly, and they'll be moving forward in the
So
beginning of
you
the year.
actually feel there's some progress? Little?
We think they're ready to move forward again. They've been on pause for 6 months, so, yep. But I mean, we had discussions with their principals last week, so we feel confident that, that they'll be ready soon and they'll be coming forward, so.
And we've heard some, not rumors, but talks about some other smaller projects. When are we going to learn about those? Seems like, we don't hear about those.
We actually
until-
have a formal application in on a project. It's at Lee and Park. It's it's a condominium
Right,
project, yeah.
Right.
And so that application's in, it's being processed. We haven't scheduled any work sessions or meetings on that as of today, but we are working up the schedule, so come first of the next year, we'll have some work sessions and so forth on that.
okay,
So
thank you.
that is the one application we do have in, so, yes. You're welcome. That's the end of my report.
Okay, great. So the January 2nd, we're going to do administrative meeting. One of the topics we should have on the agenda is the distribution of packets. We had some technical difficulties this week. Those notwithstanding, it sounds like we're going to make a shift towards more electronic distribution. So just on the agenda, please, to have that discussion. I think that's the appropriate meeting as opposed to this evening.
Fax mine to me.
And it is the last thing I want to say, it's a little unusual to say this with one of our members not here, but this was supposed to be his final meeting, Mr. Kwafo Dijon, and I did want to say publicly, since we will not be seeing him in the new year, he's resigned from the Planning Commission. Thank you for all his efforts, and I hope he sees that in the recording. Exactly. I mean, he's definitely watching. Hi, Kwafo. No, but I want to thank him for his perspective and his opinions and his diligent work over the last 4 years on the Planning Commission. So thank you, Mr. Dijon, and good luck in your future endeavors. Okay, that's all I got.
And I think thanks to everybody on this group.
Yep. All right, we're adjourned.